What's up, everyone? Thralls of Metal back again. I am Shredlord.
Necrotic Nick.
And we are here today to bring you fine folks another great album review. This time, the band Nocturnus A.D. with their second album, Unicursal.
This also comes out on the 17th of May on Profound Lore Records. This band, all right, it's got an interesting history. Technically, it formed in 1999 in Tampa, Florida. Most of the original members of the original Nocturnus, because, well, there's a little bit of a story there, too. The original version essentially kind of excommunicated one of their founding members, and honestly, probably the most, integral member, Mike Browning. And then Mike Browning ended up forming a band with a lot of the original members from the demo days called After Death, but they would actually play across the pond as Nocturnus A.D., but when they came to the States, they would play as After Death because legal reasons and such. Well, apparently he ended up just taking the name Nocturnus A.D. because the original version of this band is, I don't know, like kind of just hanging out there, not really doing anything. As Shred said, this is their second album. The first album, Paradox, was pretty damn good, but honestly, I kind of go back to the original Nocturnus, namely their debut, The Key, which I see as like kind of just a really unique, strange album that came out of the whole Tampa scene in the 90s. They were probably the first like flat out death metal band to incorporate keyboards like full time, and their sci-fi themes and weird atmosphere just kind of made them their own thing, like, kind of close to bands like Cynic or Atheist. But again, like Mike Browning, he was also a founding member of Morbid Angel at one point. He's on the Abominations of Desolation demo. And, well, that's a whole story we told in the Morbid Angel ranking about how he kind of unceremoniously left that band too. But yeah, this is just, I don't know, sort of a strange band in death metal, progressive death metal, technical death metal, avant-garde death metal.
I could see avant-garde.
Yeah, they're kind of a cult band. Like, the same kind of like interesting fan base that bands like Voivod attract. Like, they just absolutely love what this band does because they do something that is, I don't know, kind of their own.
It's almost like a weird acid trip, this album. It's spontaneous, it's chaotic, it's kind of all over the place, and then there's times where it's like chaotic overload, and then you'll stop and you'll get some calmer moments, either in intros or in shorter pieces before you go back to the chaos. But I can definitely liken this album to an acid trip.
Yeah, it's fiercely technical, lots of layers. Again, this band employs synths as well as two guitars, frequent leads, frequent riff changes, lots of layering and ambience, and of course, just very strange sci-fi themes throughout the entire thing. And honestly, it's almost like, I don't know, like maybe someone's like musical interpretation of like a cosmic horror story, because there's just so much going on both musically and thematically that this is kind of a lot to like absorb. Like, this is, I think, my second time through with this album, and admittedly it took me a while to even get into The Key originally. But man, this album is insanely busy.
Not only was it intricate, it kind of has its own unique blend of sounds that I haven't quite heard on much anything else. It has a uniqueness that stands out for sure in the way that it chooses to blend its certain synth sections or keyboard sections with the rest of the songs.
Yeah, there's like frequently like a lot of like interesting harmonies, not only between the guitars, but also between like guitars and synths. There's also like sort of like counterpoints too. There's a lot of just strange interplay in general too. And it's very busy with like a lot of elements. Like the drums are constantly going full throttle. In fact, there's only a couple of moments on here where it really slows down. The rest of the time, it's either like, some heavy syncopated grooves, thrashy gallops, and a lot of blast beats. I mean, Mike Browning is one hell of a drummer for damn sure, and he's kind of like the central figure in all of this. This does have an intro on it, and it kind of leads in with, at least a kind of morsel of what you're going to get. Like, honestly, it's kind of tame compared to the rest of it. It's just sort of a lead-in riff, lots of synth atmosphere, a lead, and then you're off to the races with the first two actual tracks, The Ascension Throne of Osiris and Cephalagod. Yeah, these song titles are wild, but very technical, very fast, and again, constantly shifting. Like, there's so many bizarre transitions on this album. And even though I'm like kind of used to this band, like this one felt like it's just even more technical than before.
Yeah, the traditional songwriting is right out the window. These guys are just kind of structuring their songs as they go per song, depending on what the mood or the vibe calls for. But if you're looking for traditional song structure here, you will not find it here. I also thought that the mix, while it wasn't bad or anything, I thought it was a interesting choice for this type of music because it has more of the warmer kind of old school feel to the recording, but sometimes the parts can be very technical and the warmth in that old school recording kind of loses some of the precision within those.
I would say like some of the low register riffing, like when it's done super fast, which guess what? Like that's kind of like the speed in terms of like the guitars. There's one like big doomy kind of slow breakdown on Nezek, the Fire of Victory. And that is kind of like the slowest moment on the entire album. The rest of it is just very intricate, very atheist, like unquestionable presence level sort of like riffing on here. But the guitars, at least on the lower register, it's kind of hard to make out what they're doing. And I kind of get the production in a sense, like this is Jared Pritchard, who's been in the Tampa scene forever. I mean, he was in Brutality for a little while, among a bunch of other bands. But he's a very like 90s Tampa guy. And this definitely has that sort of 90s throwback production. But with like 90s technical death metal and 90s technical thrash, I don't think it was as busy as this album. Like if you were to compare this to The Key, their debut, there's more space. Like the riffs have more room to breathe. Like these are riff after riff after riff. There are some good hooks along the way. Mesolithic has like a really solid death-like riffy breakdown in there. Like almost sounds like it was pulled from many of the awesome moments on Death Symbolic. But a lot of this is just clustered together harmonies and just technical runs, and it's a lot to absorb again.
Two songs that really stood out for me is towards the end of the album, it kind of follows this theme where it's a name or a word with a title afterwards. It's
a character.
A character and then a title before the outro. The first two character title songs, Yesod, The Dark Side of the Moon, and Had, The Stellar Light. I felt like those songs had some really, really good moments in it as far as some riffs and just sections in general, just big sections.
Yeah, and honestly, like some of the keyboard parts I thought were really cool in there, especially when they let the keyboards do some leads. Like generally the lead trade-offs are almost always guitars, but they kind of let some, synth leads come in there. And they're really cool because a lot of the synths on here are done mostly for atmosphere or like an accent on top of a riff or something like that. But here I think they're used kind of effectively as like a lead instrument. And honestly, Yesod, The Dark Side of the Moon, I think is honestly the biggest standout. And honestly, the one that reminds me the most of The Key. It's more death metal riffs. Like it's flat out death metal. It's like heavy chugging. It's a little bit more sinister and dark sounding. Like it definitely has its proggy moments because, yeah. But there's like a different sort of energy to it. And it's just, I don't know, a little bit meaner sounding. And again, more of like a callback to like just flat out 90s death metal. And Had, The Stellar Light, has some really awesome melodies, especially towards the end. Like it has like kind of a big, almost like melodic finish where they're just doing like riff change, lead, riff change. And it's all fitting. It doesn't feel like there are moments colliding together because, well, I mean, with all these technical runs and such, some of these transitions can be
very abrupt
or kind of clunky in general.
The clunkiness could definitely be felt at times throughout the album, and I'm not sure if that was intentional or if it's just they had so many different ideas that they were trying to cram into one song sometimes that you just throw everything into the pot and hope it works out. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, for my ears at least. Another thing that I can talk about this album that kind of took away from it in my eyes is the excessive amount of either intros in the songs or the sound effects. Almost every song has an intro to it. Some of them are a minute long. They don't really hold a lot of meaning to me in these songs. Things that are a minute and a half. And a track like Mesolithic that has this tribal drum beat for a minute and a half, and then it goes into this. First of all, that transition was not smooth. It goes into this like super heavy part. Just a lot of excess fat, I feel like, in terms of the intros and the sound effects. They really could have done themselves a favor and cut some of that a little bit to keep it more interesting to the listener.
Honestly, yeah. No, I like if you trimmed off a majority of these intros, or at least trim them down, like I get that you want to set a mood and an atmosphere. Like it's got to sound spacey and kind of cosmic and maybe a little bit spooky at times. even though there's like a wind chime on like most of them.
The Bon Jovi wind chimes.
It's not the
sounds
spookiest
like
instrument. But if you trim down some of this, that would trim down a little bit on the length of this, because this is almost an hour long, and I feel like it's a little too self-indulgent. Which, yeah, this is progressive metal. Self-indulgent is kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you know, bands like Atheist and Cynic were able to keep a lot of their songs like under, you know, 5-10 minute mark. I mean, yeah, they have some longer songs out there, but for the most part, they are a little bit more trimmed down and they get to like the meat of the songs.
And it flowed better.
Yeah, because the transitions on here, again, they just kind of come out of nowhere, and occasionally you get like transitions where they just kind of lay on that transitional part, like a turnover and a synth run and like a weird arpeggio or something like that. And it kind of gets old after a while because, you know, when they do lay on some good riffs, it's generally pretty damn good. Like, every member of this band is clearly super talented. But I think another big issue on here is this album is very much kind of a slave to its concepts. And that comes down to lyrics and vocals on here. Lyrically, all right, every song is a story or a chapter in a story. Like, this album's lyrics runs like some like weird knockoff Frank Herbert novel that I didn't read, or, you know, like several scripts that were pitched to Roger Corman back in the 70s and 80s. Like, this isn't a Alien ripoff, is it? Totally not.
No.
Why is there a chest burster scene? How did that get there? I didn't write that. Yeah, it's a bit much, and honestly, I generally don't pay much attention to lyrics, but I had to because I swear these don't really run like lyrics. It's like a novelization of something.
And his delivery especially gives credo to that statement because it sounds like he's reading from a book.
Yes. And he's very like on the beat of every word. And it becomes monotonous. The cadences are just flat. And Mike Browning, I mean, at least on the key, like, he had more of a roar. There was more character to it. I think he's kind of laying on the effects to kind of create that, you know, extra atmosphere so he doesn't have to growl that much, because, like, honestly, there really aren't many growls. Like, there's a couple of moo-ha-ha-ha-has.
Yeah, some Final Fantasy boss laughs, and
yeah,
it almost sounds like he didn't know if he wanted to, like, rap or gang vocal his parts,
yeah,
or if he was trying to, like, literate the song with, you know, like, his storytelling.
And I mean, part of it might be because he's also the drummer, and his drum work is fantastic. Like, he's a solid drummer.
100%.
So maybe, like, that is easy, like, in terms of, like, rhythmically, like, doing it live. Like, he has, like, a particular rhythm, so breaking up the cadences a different way might throw him off a little bit. I mean, he's already doing, like, some crazy polyrhythms and off-time stuff and just blast beats. So who knows? But I know that the vocals aren't delivered with very much conviction, I would say. Like, it's more like a dramatic narration than it is like a flat-out vocal delivery of, like, any kind in metal. And vocally, that is almost kind of counterintuitive to the music, because the music is technical, bizarre. It's very creative in terms of, like, just being imaginative. Again, doesn't always work, but when it does, it's pretty damn cool. But the vocals themselves, like, those feel like the most basic elements. Like, I hate to say it, it's almost like a Chris Barnes cadence from, like, any 6 Feet Under album. There's really no character to it, and that really kind of hampered this. Honestly, if this was an instrumental, I would probably get into it a little bit more, but the vocals being constantly present, like, there's no escape from him, because, like, if it's not him speaking, it is like a lead run and maybe an isolated riff for a second before he tells the next line of the story. And he is generally speaking in terms of, like, he's like the character in it. And I don't know, like, that I just can't quite get into.
Perhaps if it was done in a different way, it might have came across better. Like, if you were to change up the cadences, maybe change up the vocal sound a little bit, or the delivery, it might have worked. But using the same delivery and using the same cadences and stuff really did not do the songs any favors.
Yeah, and it kind of made this album a chore. Like, again, I like crazy, technical, weird music, but this one element on here just, I don't know, it really took me out of it. And I actually enjoyed Paradox. Like, I thought Paradox was pretty good. And This one, I don't know. I don't get it. Like, I feel like they're trying to, like, again, like, this is their second album, and they're trying to maybe do what they tried to do on Thresholds, albeit maybe a little bit better, because that album is kind of so-so as a sophomore album. I don't know. But this one really wasn't for me outside of, like, a handful of tracks and then, like, kind of moments within tracks. So, sadly, overall, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. It's okay. Like, I mean, again, it is technically impressive, but it doesn't gel in terms of songs. Like, it's not memorable for as many good reasons as it is memorable for a lot of reasons that just were kind of off-putting. Namely, you know, it's Mike Browning's vocals and the lyrics and the constant being a slave to the story of each song, which this might be one giant story. I don't know. I was reading the lyrics and just going, I have no idea. What is the vibrations of God? And there's like weird, I don't know. It's just nuts. But yeah, I couldn't really get into it conceptually and musically. I feel like it's just very scattershot most of the time. Again, all these guys I think are super impressive musicians. I've seen them live. They played at MDF. But yeah, I'm just really not feeling this. But again, that's just me. You might really appreciate this. If you're a big fan, again, of like early Morbid Angel, I would say like Blood Incantation, Time Ghoul, and of course like Atheist and Cynic. Check this out. Who knows? You might really dig it.
I gotta agree with Nick here, and I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 2.5. The three main reasons are the clunkiness of the transitions at times, the overabundance of unnecessary sound effects, noise, and introductions, and then the vocal styling and delivery. When it was on, it was on. There is a lot to enjoy of this album, but those three things kind of took away the flow, and without the flow of the album, man, it was a little bit of a chore to get through. You'd want certain parts to breathe longer, or you would go, man, I was just getting into that. And then finally at the end, there's a part, I think on the second to last track, Nutsack, of course, where it's almost doomy, and they're letting chords ring out. And this is the first time in an hour they're like literally just letting something ring out and breathe, and it sounded so good. So when I hear things like that, it makes me wonder if, even if they just sprinkled a little bit in earlier in the album, how much of a difference could that have made? And for those reasons, I give it a 2.5.
Yeah, it's kind of suffocated by just a lot of it. And there's also an outro at the end of it, and it's probably the most pointless thing on the album. Like, they really didn't need an outro because you had enough music there. In fact, Nutsack kind of ended pretty well. It ended on that big moment. But yeah, sadly, I wish I had more positive things to say about this because I do like this band. But yeah, this one was not for me. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But thrallsmetal.com is where you go to get Thralls of Metal stuff. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The older ones are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And my fellow crustaceans, it feels damn good to be back. You shall be seeing a lot more of me lately, and I'm like that hemorrhoid, you know? Sometimes you can put a little cream on me and I'll die down, but eventually I'm gonna get inflamed and rage out of your asshole, so here I am. Also, thank you, the fans, for taking time out of your day and watching videos and hanging out with shitheads like us, because without you, this is absolutely pointless. We have built a community here where we can talk and discuss about things we are most passionate about, and that is, of course, the music of the metals. So thank each and every one of you guys for taking time out of your day, for being a subscriber, for hitting like, or just thinking about our dumb asses throughout the day and watching our videos later.
Yeah. Tons of stuff coming up on the channel. We're going to get down to the Meshuggah ranking sometime middle of June. And, yeah, more collection updates, more reviews, probably some more segments. I don't know. I get bored and I think of things to talk about. So who knows what's coming. But, yeah, no reviews next week just because, well, we'll be at MDF. So we'll let you know all about that when we get back. And we'll probably be putting up some shorts as well, too. But either way, thank you guys so much. And we will catch you later.